corporate executive thought he could humiliate me for being a cleaner, but he had no idea who he was dealing with. When he grabbed my arm, what he saw left the entire room silent. But before I tell you my story, if you subscribe to the channel, your subscription is very important to us. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and for 3 years, I've been completely invisible. Every night at 6 p.m., I walk through the marble lobby of Pinnacle Financial in downtown Manhattan. The security guard nods without really seeing me. The elevator hums as it carries me to the 47th floor. I push my cleaning cart through corridors where million-dollar deals are made daily. These walls have heard secrets that could topple governments, yet they've never heard mine. The executives in their $1,000 suits see me as part of the furniture. I'm the woman who empties their trash, wipes their conference tables, vacuums their Persian rugs. They have no idea that these same hands once held weapons that could end lives in seconds. They don't know that behind my quiet demeanor lies a past soaked in blood and honor. But tonight, everything was about to change. The annual holiday party was in full swing when I arrived for my shift. Crystal chandeliers cast golden light over men and women celebrating another profitable year. Champagne flutes clinked. Laughter echoed through the executive floor. Designer dresses swished past my cart. I kept my head down, moving methodically from office to office. This was my routine. Invisible, efficient, forgotten. I'd perfected the art of being unseen, a skill that had once kept me alive in Afghanistan. Now it just kept me employed and safely numb. The party noise grew louder as the night progressed, voices slurring with expensive alcohol. I checked my watch, 9:30 p.m. Just 2 more hours and I could return to my empty apartment. Just 2 more hours and I could continue hiding from who I used to be. Room 4712 was my next stop. Corner office, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. As I entered, I noticed the framed photos on the mahogany desk. A yacht, a mansion in the Hamptons, ski trips to Aspen. This was James Morrison's office, Senior Vice President, the kind of man who inherited his position. I'd cleaned this office hundreds of times, always when he wasn't there. Tonight was different. Tonight, he was leaning against his desk, bourbon in hand, talking to 2 colleagues. They were discussing some merger, their voices full of self-importance and entitlement. I moved quietly around them, emptying the wastebasket, wiping down surfaces. For a moment, I thought I'd remain invisible as always. For a moment, I thought I'd finish and leave unnoticed. I was wrong. Well, well, what do we have here? James's voice cut through their conversation. His colleagues turned to look at me, their eyes taking in my uniform, my cleaning supplies. I felt their gaze like a physical weight, the way predators size up prey. 20 years ago, I would have recognized that look instantly, the look of men who think they own everything. But I was no longer Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell of the Navy SEALs. I was just Sarah, the night janitor, the woman trying to disappear. Gentlemen, meet our help, James continued, his voice dripping with condescension. I kept working, hoping they'd lose interest and return to their conversation. I should have known better. Men like James feed on power, especially over those they perceive as powerless. The alcohol in his system only made him bolder.
"You know, I've seen you around for years," he said, stepping closer to my cart. "Always so quiet, always so submissive. Very different from these career women, isn't it, boys?" His colleagues chuckled, the kind of nervous laughter that enables bad behavior. I continued cleaning, my movements steady despite the familiar rage building in my chest. This wasn't the first time I'd been dismissed, diminished, degraded. But something about his tone, his proximity, the way he was performing for his audience, set me on edge. "Tell me, sweetheart, do you have any dreams? Any ambitions beyond this?" He gestured at my cart. The word sweetheart hit me like a slap. It reminded me of commanding officers who questioned my abilities. It reminded me of men who thought they could break me because I was a woman. They had all been proven very, very wrong. I straightened up slowly, meeting his eyes for the first time. "I'm just trying to do my job, sir," I said quietly, my voice steady as granite. "Sir," he laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the windows. "I like that. Respect." His colleagues moved closer, sensing entertainment at my expense. "But seriously, what's your story? Divorced? Kids you can't support? Bad choices?" Each question was a blade designed to cut, to humiliate, to reduce me to nothing. I'd heard variations of these questions before, from enemy interrogators who thought a woman would break easily. They had underestimated me then, just as James was underestimating me now. But I had learned to control my reactions, to bury my training deep beneath the surface. Or so I thought. "Actually, gentlemen," James announced to his audience, his voice growing louder and more theatrical, "I think our little cleaning lady here needs to learn some lessons about respect." He moved even closer, invading my personal space with the confidence of a man who'd never faced real consequences. "See, in the real world, the world where people like us make the decisions, there's a hierarchy. And people like you," he pointed directly at me, "exist to serve people like us." I felt something shift inside me, a door that had been carefully locked beginning to creak open. My hands remained steady on the cleaning cart, but my muscles remembered other movements, deadly movements, efficient movements, final movements. "So here's what's going to happen," James continued, completely unaware of the danger he was courting. "You're going to learn exactly where you belong in this world." James stepped back and smiled at his colleagues like a performer who just delivered his opening line. "You see, gentlemen, this is what I'm talking about when I say America has lost its way." He gestured toward me as if I were an exhibit in a museum. "We've forgotten about natural order, about knowing your place in society." His bourbon-scented breath filled the space between us as he leaned closer. "Some people are born to lead, to make decisions, to shape the world." He paused dramatically, his eyes never leaving mine. "And others? Well, others are born to clean up our messes." The cruelty in his voice was casual, practiced, like he'd delivered this speech before. I stood perfectly still, but inside, something ancient and dangerous was waking up. "Look at her," James continued, circling me like a predator. 40-something, probably divorced, maybe kids she can't afford to take care of properly. Each word was chosen to wound, to strip away whatever dignity I had left. "I bet she tells herself she's independent and strong." He made air quotes mockingly. "But the truth is, she's exactly where she belongs, serving her betters." His colleagues shifted uncomfortably, but none of them spoke up. They were cowards, the kind of men who enable cruelty through their silence. This is the problem with giving people false hope, making them think they can be anything they want to be, when the reality is so much simpler. I thought about my daughter Emma, how she used to say she wanted to be like Mommy when she grew up. The irony wasn't lost on me. She'd wanted to be like the woman I used to be, not the woman I'd become. "Tell me, sweetheart," James said, moving to his desk where a fresh cup of coffee sat steaming. "Tell me, what did you dream of being when you were a little girl? A princess? A doctor? A teacher?" He picked up the coffee cup, cradling it in his hands like a weapon. "Did anyone ever tell you that you could be anything you wanted to be?" The question hung in the air, and for a moment I was 8 years old again in Kansas. My father, a Marine himself, telling me I could conquer the world if I set my mind to it. "Because that," James continued, "was the first lie anyone ever told you." He took a sip of his coffee, savoring both the drink and my humiliation. The truth is much simpler. You were born to be exactly what you are right now. I could feel my heart rate slowing, the way it used to before a mission.
You want to know what I see when I look at you? James asked, his voice rising. I see failure. I see someone who gave up on themselves long ago. He began pacing again, energized by his own cruelty. I see someone who probably tells herself she's between opportunities or going through a rough patch. The coffee cup trembled slightly in his hand, the alcohol making him unsteady. But the reality is that this cleaning, this servitude, this is your ceiling. He stopped directly in front of me, close enough that I could count the bourbon stains on his teeth. This is as good as your life gets, and deep down, you know it. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, the only sound in the suddenly quiet office. You will never be anything more than what you are right now. Nothing. That word, nothing, hit me like a physical blow. Not because it hurt, but because it was the same word I'd been calling myself for 3 years. Ever since Emma died, ever since I'd walked away from everything I'd sworn to protect. Nothing, James repeated, savoring the word. A nobody, a zero. His colleagues were watching now, drawn in by the spectacle of my destruction. And do you know what nothings do when they're in the presence of somebodies? He raised the coffee cup higher, and I knew what was coming. They remember their place. The cup tilted in his hand, and hot coffee cascaded down my uniform shirt. The liquid was scalding, but I didn't flinch. Pain was an old friend of mine. The office erupted in nervous laughter from his colleagues, the kind of sound hyenas make. "Oops," he said with mock concern. "How clumsy of me." Coffee dripped from my shirt onto the expensive carpet, staining both equally. I looked down at the brown spreading across my chest, then back up at his smirking face. For 3 years, I'd swallowed my pride, accepted my punishment, embraced my invisibility. For 3 years, I'd told myself I deserved this life, this treatment, the slow erasure. But standing there, coffee cooling against my skin, something fundamental shifted. The woman who had once led men into battle was still inside me, buried but not dead. And she was very, very tired of hiding. The laughter around me began to fade as I remained completely motionless.
"Well?" James demanded, his voice cutting through the awkward silence. "Aren't you going to clean that up?" He gestured at the coffee stains on the carpet, then at my soaked shirt. "That's what you do, isn't it? Clean up messes?" I reached for my cart, pulling out paper towels with mechanical precision. But instead of dropping to my knees to clean his floor, I did something unexpected. I set the towels aside and began walking toward the door. "Where do you think you're going?" James called after me. "The bathroom," I said quietly, my voice carrying a new undertone he couldn't identify. "To change my shirt." As I reached the doorway, I turned back to face him, and for just a moment, he saw something in my eyes that made him step backward. The bathroom on the 47th floor was pristine, all marble and gold fixtures. I stared at myself in the mirror, coffee stains dark against my white uniform shirt. My reflection looked tired, defeated, exactly like the woman James thought I was. But as I unbuttoned my coffee-soaked shirt, I made a decision that would change everything. In my locker, I had a spare outfit, a simple white blouse with short sleeves. I'd never worn it to work before because it showed too much. It revealed things I'd spent 3 years keeping hidden. But tonight, James Morrison had pushed me past my breaking point. Tonight, he was going to learn that some women are far more dangerous than they appear. And some secrets, once revealed, can destroy the men who force them into the light. I stood in that marble bathroom for exactly 3 minutes, staring at the woman in the mirror. The coffee-stained uniform shirt lay crumpled in the sink, a symbol of the old Sarah. The white blouse I pulled from my bag was crisp, professional, but most importantly, short-sleeved. As I buttoned it up, I caught a glimpse of ink on my upper right arm. Black lines that told a story I'd kept hidden for 3 long years.
I rolled my shoulders back, feeling muscles remember their proper alignment. For the first time since Emma's funeral, I stood at my full height. The woman looking back at me in the mirror wasn't the broken janitor who'd entered this bathroom. She was someone James Morrison had never met before, and she was about to remind him that some storms come without warning. When I walked back into that office, the change was immediate and unmistakable. My stride was different, purposeful, measured, like I was walking point on a mission. James and his colleagues were still laughing about their coffee joke, but their laughter died as I approached. "Well, well," James slurred, his bourbon-loosened tongue emboldened by my return. "Look who came crawling back." But there was something in his voice now, a slight uncertainty he tried to mask with aggression. "I hope you learned your lesson about knowing your place." I didn't respond, just began methodically cleaning the remaining areas of his office, but my movements were different now. Controlled, efficient, almost military in their precision. James noticed the change too, though he couldn't quite articulate what was different. What he could see, however, was the edge of something dark on my exposed upper arm. "Hold on there, princess," James said, moving closer to inspect what he'd glimpsed. "Is that a tattoo? Our little church mouse has some ink? Let's see what kind of tramp stamp our cleaning lady is hiding." The casual cruelty in his voice was nothing new, but something in my posture made him hesitate. Still, liquid courage pushed him forward. "Come on, don't be shy. We've already seen your professional capabilities." He gestured at the coffee stains on the carpet with theatrical disdain. "Now let's see what other poor life choices you've made." I continued cleaning, but I could feel his eyes boring into my arm. The partial view of my tattoo was driving him crazy. He could see just enough to know there was more. "I'm talking to you." James's voice cracked like a whip across the office. In one swift, aggressive motion, he reached out and grabbed my right arm. His fingers dug into my bicep as he yanked my arm toward him. "Let's see what we're dealing with here, shall we?" But as he twisted my arm to get a better view, the short sleeve of my blouse rode up. What was revealed in that moment changed everything. There, etched in bold black ink across my upper arm, was an eagle, globe, and anchor. But this wasn't just any military tattoo. Beneath it were the words that made James's face go white. United States Navy SEALs, in precise, military lettering, and below that, a date that marked my graduation from the most elite military training program in the world. The office went dead silent. James's grip on my arm loosened as his brain struggled to process what he was seeing. His colleagues stared in shock, their earlier laughter replaced by stunned disbelief. That's not possible," James stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. I looked down at his hand still touching my arm, then slowly raised my eyes to meet his. "You asked about my dreams?" I said quietly, my voice carrying a new authority that filled the room. "I dreamed of serving my country. I dreamed of protecting people who couldn't protect themselves." James released my arm like it had caught fire, stumbling backward. But James, even faced with this revelation, couldn't let go of his need to dominate. The alcohol, the audience, the challenge to his worldview, it all combined into a desperate aggression. "That's a very touching story," he said, his voice shaking but still venomous. "But I'm supposed to believe that our little cleaning lady is some kind of elite soldier." He looked to his colleagues for support, but they were staring at him like he'd lost his mind. "Navy SEALs, really? You expect us to believe that fairy tale?" I watched him carefully, recognizing the signs of a cornered animal. "Anyone can get a tattoo, sweetheart. Hell, I could get one tomorrow." His bravado was paper thin, but it was all he had left. "If you're really some kind of super soldier, then prove it." The challenge hung in the air between us like a loaded weapon. "Prove it," James repeated, his voice growing stronger as he convinced himself he was calling my bluff. "If you're really this big, bad Navy SEAL, then show us what you got." He spread his arms wide in a mocking gesture of vulnerability. "Come on, soldier girl, let's see some of that elite training."
His colleagues exchanged nervous glances, but none of them had the courage to intervene. What's wrong? All that tough talk, but when time's come to back it up. He let the sentence hang, baiting me with the oldest trick in the book. I stood perfectly still, my hands at my sides, breathing slow and controlled. "Mr. Morrison," I said quietly, "you really don't want me to do that." But James Morrison was a man who had never been told no by someone he considered beneath him. "Oh, I think I do," he laughed, the sound harsh and grating in the quiet office. "See, I think you're full of shit. I think you're just another loser with a fake tattoo." He began rolling up his sleeves, playing to his audience. "I played football at Yale, varsity level. I know a thing or two about physical confrontation." The absurdity of comparing college football to special forces training would have been funny if it weren't so pathetic. "So here's what's going to happen," he continued, stepping closer. "You're going to try to defend yourself against me, and when you fail spectacularly," he smiled that cruel smile again, the one that probably worked on countless others, "you're going to get on your knees and clean up that coffee stain like the good little servant you are." I felt something shift in my chest, a door that had been locked tight, beginning to creak open.
The space between us crackled with tension as James positioned himself like he was about to tackle a quarterback. "This should be entertaining," one of his colleagues muttered, but his voice lacked conviction. I could see the doubt creeping into their faces as they really looked at me for the first time. My stance, my breathing, the way I held my hands, none of it screamed victim anymore. "Last chance to back down, princess?" James taunted, bouncing slightly on his feet. "Admit you're a fraud, clean up your mess, and maybe I'll let you keep your job." But I was no longer listening to his words. Instead, I was calculating distances, angles, leverage points. 3 years of rust were falling away like shed skin. The woman who had once cleared buildings full of armed terrorists was waking up. "You know what your problem is, James?" I said, my voice calm as still water. "You've never faced a real predator before. You've only bullied prey." His cocky smile faltered slightly, but alcohol and arrogance pushed him forward. Big words from someone who cleans toilets for a living. That's when he made his move, a wild, telegraphed swing aimed at my face. In college football, that might have been intimidating. Against someone with my training, it was suicide. Time seemed to slow as his hand arced toward me, clumsy and obvious. I could have stepped aside and let him stumble past me. Instead, I decided to give him exactly what he'd asked for. My response was instantaneous and devastating. I caught his wrist mid-swing, using his own momentum against him. In one fluid motion, I twisted his arm behind his back and drove him face first into his mahogany desk. His expensive coffee mug shattered as his cheek met the wood with a satisfying thud. "This is called an arm bar control hold," I explained calmly, applying just enough pressure to make him gasp. "I could dislocate your shoulder right now with a simple twist." James struggled against my grip, but his movements only tightened the hold. "I could also collapse your trachea, break 3 ribs, or render you unconscious in under 10 seconds. His colleagues stood frozen, their mouths hanging open in shock. But I'm not going to do any of those things, because unlike you, I have self-control.
"Please," James wheezed against the desk. All his arrogance evaporated in an instant. I'm sorry. Please let me go." The transformation from predator to prey was complete and pathetic. "Are you really sorry, James? Or are you just sorry you picked the wrong target?" I maintained the hold for another 5 seconds, letting him feel his complete helplessness. Then I released him and stepped back, watching as he stumbled away from the desk. His face was red where it had met the wood, his expensive shirt wrinkled and disheveled. "You see, the difference between us," I continued conversationally, "is that I chose to stop." He rubbed his wrist, staring at me with a mixture of fear and rage. "You would have hit me, a woman half your size, because you thought you could get away with it?" The office door suddenly burst open, and David Chen, the building's director of operations, strode in. "What the hell is going on in here?" he demanded, taking in the scene before him. James, disheveled and shaken, his colleagues pale and speechless, me, standing calmly beside my cleaning cart. "We heard shouting from the party downstairs," David continued, his eyes moving from person to person. "Mr. Morrison, you look like you've been in a fight." James opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He was trapped between his ego and his fear, unable to admit what had really happened. "I think," I said quietly, "Mr. Morrison was just learning about respect." David's shirt eyes took in every detail, the broken coffee mug, the stains on my shirt, the guilt written across James's face. "Someone better start explaining, and it better be the truth."
That's not how it happened," James stammered, finally finding his voice. "She attacked me. Look at my face." He gestured to the red mark on his cheek. David stepped closer, examining James's injury with professional detachment. "Interesting. Miss Mitchell, do you have any self-defense training?" "Some," I replied, the understatement of the century. James's colleagues shifted nervously, knowing they'd witnessed something that could destroy their careers. "She's lying," James exploded. "She's just a cleaning lady. She can't—" "Mr. Morrison," David cut him off sharply, "I suggest you stop talking immediately." He pulled out his phone and began scrolling through what looked like employee files. "Miss Mitchell, would you mind showing me that tattoo Mr. Morrison mentioned?" I rolled up my sleeve without hesitation, revealing the Navy SEAL insignia. David's eyebrows shot up as he read the dates and designations etched in ink. Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell retired, Medal of Honor recipient. James's face went white as David continued reading from my military record. 15 years of active duty, including multiple deployments to Afghanistan and Iraq. The medal reference wasn't entirely accurate, but David was making a point. Specialized in hostage rescue and counter-terrorism operations. He looked up from his phone, his expression grim. "Mr. Morrison, you just assaulted a decorated war veteran." James began to hyperventilate, the full weight of his actions finally hitting him. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," David continued, his voice taking on the tone of a prosecutor. "You deliberately spilled coffee on Miss Mitchell's uniform, humiliated her in front of witnesses." He paused, looking at James's colleagues who were trying to become invisible. "Then, when she returned from changing her shirt, you physically grabbed her arm. And finally, you challenged her to a physical confrontation." The case was building itself, each fact another nail in James's professional coffin. "Is that an accurate summary of events?" David asked the room. James's colleagues nodded reluctantly, their loyalty evaporating in the face of legal liability. "Sir, we tried to tell him to stop, but he wouldn't listen." The lie was transparent, but it showed which way the wind was blowing. "Mr. Morrison," David said with finality, "you're terminated. Effective immediately." "What? You can't do that. Your father isn't here to save you from this one." David cut him off. "Security will escort you out of the building. You have 10 minutes to collect your personal items." James looked around desperately, seeking support that would never come. "This is insane. She's just a janitor. You're firing me for a janitor." The irony was perfect. His contempt for my position was exactly what had sealed his fate. "I'm firing you for assault, harassment, and creating a hostile work environment," David corrected. "The fact that you still don't understand what you did wrong proves I'm making the right decision." 2 security guards appeared in the doorway as if summoned by magic. "Ms. Mitchell," David said, turning to me as James was led away in disgrace, "I owe you an apology. We failed in our duty to provide you with a safe work environment." "It's fine," I began, but he held up a hand. "No, it's not fine. What happened here tonight is unacceptable." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I also think we've been wasting your talents in your current position." Something in his tone made me look up sharply. "Our head of security is retiring next month. The position comes with a significant salary increase. And honestly, after what I just witnessed, I can't think of anyone more qualified." The offer hung between us like a bridge to a different future. 6 months later, I stood in that same office, but everything had changed. The nameplate on the door read, Sarah Mitchell, Director of Security. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see Central Park awakening to another spring morning. My daughter Emma would have been 9 years old today. I touched the small photo on my desk, her bright smile frozen in time. I found my way back, baby girl, I whispered to her image. The grief would always be there, but it no longer defined me. I had learned that healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing to honor the past while building something better from the pieces. And sometimes, just sometimes, the people who try to break us end up setting us free.